Hey Josh, how's it going?
I'm all right, thanks. All things considered, I feel very fortunate. I'm holding up okay. How are you?
Good. I'm doing pretty good. How's your sort of lifestyle been this I know you did a sort of a quarantine interview in April, but has anything changed? Is
Oh,
how's life been?
it's been weird. I'm very lucky that I've been working full time for Jesus and Marrow basically the whole pandemic, and so I feel like that's like not having to scrounge for employment or worry about employment has been really lucky. And I'm here with my wife and our dog, so that's been really lucky. But it's been a weird time. There are like weeks where just because of pandemic conditions, I'll only be going outside at like 3 a.m. when my dog wakes up for a walk. And that's like my
Yeah.
only outdoor time for the week, doing that like 5 nights in a row. And then I have to be like, oh, I should like see the sunlight. Like we have,
Yeah. Get some
yeah,
vitamin D.
yeah, exactly. We got like vitamin D supplements because it's like, it's winter and it's just gray and we don't have a ton of like natural light in our apartment. So it
Right.
feels like, yeah, I just like have never, it's the only time in my life I've ever been like, oh, I don't go outside and I need to simulate the sun on my body
Yeah.
with
Right.
medicine.
I feel like everyone's at like a basic like hum of just like getting like I have to get basic vitamins, I have
Yep.
to get like sleep,
Yeah. Yep.
have to make sure like everything's okay. So you're like self-described, and people describe you a lot as like an extreme optimist.
Mhm.
Has that changed at all?
You know, I think I feel about the same in terms of like my baseline level of optimism. I think I've grown increasingly discouraged with like the big systems that we have that are supposed to be working on behalf of
Hmm.
people and are in the United States have like largely abandoned and failed people. But I think I'm like optimistic about the way that people have stepped up across the country to be there for each other, whether it's mutual aid and like all the protests last summer, and I think I'm like still very optimistic that like people can take care of each other and change the bigger forces,
Hmm.
make a change in bigger forces. But like, yeah, I'm certainly not an optimist in that I'm like, things are pretty good.
Yeah, right.
This is about as good as things could possibly get. Like definitely there's a lot that just like really stinks.
Yeah, there. I had a feeling like when it started, I don't know. It was just like I mean, it's grim, but like it was like shit. Like society. It was like in an Onion headline the other day. It was like society's like an illusion. Like some of this stuff isn't really working.
Right. It
Like
was the what was the Onion headline? It was like, unfortunately, we for the Joker or something, we no longer live in a society. Or someone
yeah,
tweeted that, and that was gosh, I wish I remember who tweeted, but it's so funny that it's like, oh yeah, like there are these big institutions that are supposed to be holding society together, and uh they're failing a lot. And then there's like a segment of the population that's like, yeah, get them. I'm like,
right.
ooh,
Like
it's like really terrifying.
the only thing that I feel like the federal government could mobilize in the last year was like the police or
Yeah,
like the military in our own borders. It's kind
which
of
is,
scary.
yeah, it's like really, it's like so, not that I was like, oh, everything's really humming along before this year,
Yeah.
but I do think it's really like exposed the ways in which like the government is not either, doesn't have either like the apparatus or at the very least like the willpower to like step up and support residents. And it's like it's such a disappointment to like watch so many failures. But then again, the optimism comes from like seeing the way people care about each other on like
Hmm.
community levels.
Have you always like writing on John Oliver? Have you always been like politically minded, or is that something you had to like sort of like ease into, or is it something you've always been interested in?
I think I'm hopefully getting like more mindful and aware and continually over time, like getting have like refining what I think about the world and how it works and how I want to be a part of politics and stuff, whether it's like electoral or grassroots organizing and stuff like that. But I definitely have always, it's some like, I think I beat myself up for um for like not having done more younger. But
Hmm.
then I remember like getting into like a not a vicious argument, but like an argument with like a right leaning English teacher in high school about like the Iraq war as it was
Yeah.
happening. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. I was not like I wasn't like fully blinders on like American flag
Mhm.
bandana. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I
yeah, like that
yeah.
patriotic like zeal was insane at that time, right?
Yeah, it was really wild.
Yeah.
And it was like during a time where I feel like so much of my consciousness about the world was being formed for the first time about like and I remember not I don't think I was like I think now I have a better perspective on that time than I did when I was, you know, 16, 17, 18. But I'm still
Right.
like, oh yeah, there's so much that was so much of like how I interact with the world was formed by like the Bush administration kind of like leading America to war under false pretenses that even under the pretenses that they even under those false pretenses was like, but do we have to do this? It seems like
Yeah,
we
it's
don't
like
have to do this.
it felt so compulsory. Just like, yeah, we
We
have to launch
gotta
a
do
war.
it. We gotta do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always kind of been, and I remember like conversations with my dad when I was like a kid about stuff like this, where I would just be like, but like, okay, like so that's kind of like how I felt, where it's like what are we? Do we get to just tell other governments like, hey, knock it off, or we're gonna come
Right.
fight you? And it's like that doesn't seem quite right.
Hmm. So like you started at John Oliver in like 2015, right? As like a
I,
social media
I started there at 2014 doing
14.
yeah, the social and digital stuff. Yeah, I like
So that was like,
running. Yeah.
sorry, that was like the precipice of like the whole Trump era and stuff. Was there like how was that change? Was it like, because it became very Trump focused and I think it's
Mhm.
like changed over time into like becoming more focused on like kind of like unique issues, like really specific issues, and it kind of gets like into the nitty gritty.
So
How has that change been?
so when I started there in 2014, there was a lot of um there was like a real idea of like covering stuff in either at length that other comedy shows weren't attacking stuff, or like just stuff that was less covered by U.S. media, U.S. comedy, and that was really fun and exciting. And I've said this before, but like the absolute lowest tier problem of the Trump era and the modern era of politics is like frazzled and exasperated comedy writers. But I will say, like, transitioning to when Trump became like the ascendant political figure on the right, having to think about him and write about him week to week, it was a pain in the ass and it wasn't fun. And like people who were like, oh, but Trump's going to be so good for comedy. It's like, well, you don't like comedy then, or you don't know what it's like to make comedy. Again, the absolute lowest tier problem of Donald Trump. But I don't know a single comedy writer that was like, oh, hell yeah, just 4 years, is really 5+ years, right? Because the year he was running, plus the 4 year is in office, plus like he's not gone now. Like he's,
Right.
you know what I mean? He's like uh in hibernating or in hibernation, just like restoring his strength.
Yeah, he's in like a back to tank, just like getting
Oh
water.
yeah, or like whatever, Diet Coke.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. Like I would love to never think about or write about him again, and hopefully, because I left a couple years ago from Last Week Tonight, and
Oh, you
I
did?
yeah.
Oh shit.
That's okay. I've been at Jesus and Marrow since
Hmm.
December 2018. Yeah, 19, 20, 21. Yeah, so this is the third season I've been there, and but
Hmm.
it feels like they've been able to, I mean, even while I was there through the first uh 16, 17, 18, 3 years of the Trump administration, we tried to, whenever we could, talk about like issues and bigger picture stuff, instead of being like Trump said Kofifi and now that's like a media cycle. You know what I mean? But
Right.
it's still, it's just
Yeah.
like, it's so hard because he was such he was so horrible and was such a took up so much oxygen in the media environment that like if you wanted to cover stories you had to like look past him to find out what the other stories were.
And that was kind of like, I felt like his, whether it's, the big question is whether it's intentional or not, but like it's sort of like an Ian Curtis thing where like his strategy is to like you said, create these news cycles
Yeah.
through like liberal outrage.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just like never ends.
I feel like that's kind of like, not to go too deep on Trump, but that feels like his perverse gift is being able to like garner attention for himself. And you know, he used to
Mm-hmm.
do it by uh real estate deal, not that he wasn't like horrible and racist back then, but like through real estate deals and like page 6 gossip items. And then it became increasingly reliable for him to do that through like crypto fascism and
Mm-hmm.
and just like stoking right-wing outrage at anything on the left. And that I think like I think he's a horrible person with horrible beliefs, but like to me it stems from his just like desire for power and money and attention.
So like you're co-executive producer and writer on Jesus and Mero, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is the work changed from John Oliver?
Oh, it's so different. In
Mm-hmm.
a way that's like it's really I love both, and I love having these two like really different experiences. Where at John Oliver as a staff writer, you know, working for Last Week Tonight, it was a lot of like writing and writing and writing, and the scripts were really long and detailed, and just a ton of alternate jokes, and really looking at like politics and social issues at like with on a really granular level. And then with at Jesus and Marrow, so much of what I'm doing is like it's more producery stuff. I like work on the edits of the show, which is like a really
Mm-hmm.
helpful thing to do for like a more rounded TV education, like just having different kinds of jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
because Jesus and Marrow are so riffy and extemporaneous and so like just like so brilliant off the cuff, and that's how they like to work, and that's how the show is made. It's just like totally different than like, okay, we're going to prepare super thoroughly and make sure that every you know every word is in place before we go to taping, and we know exactly how long the taping will last. And now it's like, okay, we are presenting this kind of stuff, or like pitching ideas and concepts and jokes and locations and sketches, and like finding ways to like create the most room, like a structure for Jesus and Marrow to like have the easiest time being their like brilliant improvisational selves. And so it's like just like this the show is made, the structure of the show is done totally differently. And it's like it's really fun to see the different ways to make a TV show. And both shows I'm like really proud of how they come out and take a whole big team to make you know, it's not just John sitting there reading from teleprompter. It's like the writers and the producers and the research team and the people the Chris Werner, who produces and directs the remote shoots, and his team. And like um and then with Jesus and Marrow, it's like the you know there's writers that write material for the show, and then there's producers that make sure that Julia Young, who's the producer that kind of like runs them through the show, you hear her voice sometimes, is like prepared in case they have questions for her, which happens sometimes. Like in the middle of the taping, they'll be like, oh, how much did that cost, and she'll have to like have that at her fingertips. So it's just like two different ways that a really talented team can work in support of a you know a half hour comedy that comes out. You know, the format is the same, 30-minute late night comedy
Mm-hmm.
ostensibly, but just like the vibe of it and the structure of it is so different, which is really fun.
Is that like a hat that you haven't worn before? Just like producing and stuff like that?
Yeah, this is pretty new for me. The I mean, I've done little stuff like this here and there. I've produced live shows that I've done, and
Mm-hmm.
but this is like, and I got to give notes on edits and stuff for certain things at Last Week Tonight, but it's much more hands-on. And fortunately, like the you know the people above me, Mike Polasek and Suzanne Fagel, and the team I work with, Nick Hale and Justin Tyler, who I've worked with on the remote shoots, and Ayana and Kesha, like everyone is so capable that I was able to kind of like learn some stuff on the fly. And I think everybody is kind of, because this is such a Jesus and Marrow is made in such, I think, like a unique way for a late night show. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
had to learn some stuff on the fly, and everybody like it's really collaborative and
Oh, that's
wonderful.
sick.
Yeah, it's like it's very cool just to see the way that everybody is like, oh, this is how we make the show. Like when we shoot a sketch where there are beats written out and we're bringing in um other actors and from the outside, and we have to be like, hey, it's going to be like, here are the beats, and like there's going to be a bunch of improv, and like feel free to
Hmm.
be loose, and like let the guys be loose. And like we've had Peter Gross come in a few times, who was on worked on the President Show and was on Veep, who's just like a brilliant improviser. And
I actually had a beer with Pete like randomly
oh
like a
really?
year and a half ago.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
rules.
yeah, he's really nice.
He's really nice and like so talented. Also, like the it was great at like wait, don't tell me. Just so funny and so fast. And like you might like just from his vibe, you'd be like, would he fit with Jesus and Mero as like a performer? But like
Hmm.
they play off each other so well, and like that kind of stuff. And like this kind of like sketch producing and writing, I think is uh oh, it's like some of those sketches are closer to like Curb Your Enthusiasm structure than a typical late night where you like hit the beats, then you're out, you edit it together quickly to get it on the air for topical stuff. I think like they just like having it be a little looser is like a fun, interesting challenge.
And how did that challenge come about? You were just like, you know what? I think it's time I start like taking, the front seat and like steering a ship as opposed to like writing for the ship or something.
I'd been in Last Week Tonight for 5 years, and I was like, okay, I think I've learned. I was still like refining skills and like getting better as a writer and a like a thinker about these issues and like how to create comedy from them. But I started to think about like, okay, if I want to like learn a new set of skills, I'll have to leave eventually. And I wasn't like clawing at the walls to get out, but I got this opportunity to interview for this position, and I really like Jesus and Mero. I think they're so funny, and it felt like I was gonna go to a show because I'd gotten asked before to like, hey, would you come work on this project that's like we're trying to do Last Week Tonight, but for science or history. And I was like, oh, I don't, this is like, I don't necessarily want to like replicate the same thing. So when I had a chance to move to a show with like a totally different feel, but like really hilarious, wonderful host talent, I was like, yeah, absolutely. This
Mhm.
is the exact opportunity I would need if I was going to leave this dream job to go to another dream job.
Wow. Are you still sort of like writing on your own? Like I know you're performing for us and like have you done like a lot of like online shows or something like that or
Yeah, I've done a bunch. I've done a bunch of online shows. I started a podcast this year, or sorry, within the past year, started a podcast it's called Make My Day, and it's a comedy game show where the premise is the guests are competing to cheer me up. And it was originally supposed to be like a panel show about the news. But when we launched,
Mhm.
the news was like, well, there's the coronavirus. That's most of the news.
Yeah.
And so it became, instead of a panel, because we couldn't record in a studio, we pivoted to just one-on-one most of the time. So it's like a
Mhm.
game show where there's only one guest, so the guest is guaranteed to win. So and that is honestly like I really miss live performance. um
Mhm.
but this has been such a fun, like it's the kind of like twofold benefit of it feels like performing because it's
Mhm.
writing and telling jokes, but it's also I call up a friend for on a video call for an hour a week, and we goof off and tell each other jokes and crack each other up, and then it's out in the world. So it's like as close as I've been getting to like social hangouts and live performance at the same time.
Is that kind of like your I don't want to use the word ish, but is that kind of like is performing always been your because I know you started out as stand up right in
Mhm.
Boston.
Yeah,
Is that has that still remained like the thing that you're always kind of like itching to do or
I think it's not always performance. I love performing, but it's not performing so much as like writing the stuff that is really fun for me. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of one way to do that is to write stuff for myself to perform, you know, like whether it's stand up or whether it's a podcast where I'm just like, I want to do this and I can just do it because no one's going to stop me from putting out a podcast. I mean, someone might try eventually, but
Right. Yeah. Eventually.
it would take an exceptional effort. But yeah, so that's really fun. But also like writing a book was that for me, like just getting to pitch a book that I was like, okay, you know, I'd co-written a book a few years before, and then in 2017 I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I have the idea for a book that I like really want to write and know I'm going to have to sit with for 2 years, and then we'll be out in the world and people will keep finding it for years after that, and ideally. And so I really like made a concerted effort to like when I pitched my essay collection, Nice Try, I really wanted to make it something that I was like excited to have in my life for the foreseeable future. And I feel really psyched about how it came out in regards to that.
Is 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 writing always fun for you, or is it sometimes like can it because it's become your job, like you're so good
Mhm.
at it, you like make money at it with it, but is it like, oh man, like this is really stressing me out, like, or does that affect you at all?
Totally. Yeah. I think there are definitely times where I'm like, this isn't coming out how I want, or I have this assignment that I like took on that I'm like, oh, this is a lot. Or like days where I'm like, I would rather not write, you know, whether it was like I slept badly last night or
Hmm.
whatever. But I really do like it. I'm not one of those writers. Like I'm certainly not like every day I just get up and words are divinely flow through my fingers onto my keyboard,
Right.
but I'm definitely also not like a writer who's like, God, I hate writing. You know what I mean? I like
Hmm.
that feeling. Gosh, I forget whose quote it is, but like enjoying the feeling of having written, but hating the feeling of writing. But I like writing,
Right.
especially, I mean, and there are different formats that are like more immediately pleasurable and more that are like long term gratifying. Like, I love, like, stand up writing is so fun and
Hmm.
so hard in that, like, even when I'm sure something is good, if it doesn't work, then it's not good. You know what I mean? Like when you're like, if
Yeah.
I take it on stage and I'm like, man, I spent hours on this and I just love the way the words come together and I think this idea is so funny. And then if it falls flat in front of audiences, it's like, well, I nope, I was wrong.
Yeah.
But with like, I think with essay writing, there it's like a little less the process of the writing itself is a little less pleasurable at times because there's like work that has to be done to make it work that's not like stand up is just like if you write a song that's all choruses where you're just like I'm just writing the like whoa 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 parts that the audience, you know, or mostly
Right.
like that and then the intro. But with, you know, when you're doing essay writing or like writing a longer piece like for something like Last Week Tonight, there's a lot more like intricate setup required, which I think I feel really proud of doing that work, and I'm it's like an interesting intellectual exercise, but it's not just like, okay, what's a 3-word phrase that will get a laugh at the end of this line, or, you know,
Right.
forget 3 words, like a phrase that will get a laugh at the end of this line that gets me to the next joke.
Hmm.
Where, you know, where I'm just like hmm crepuscular fart monster, that sounds funny, like, you know, just getting to do that is like a lot of fun. And then the other stuff, there's like a different pleasure in it.
Is it kind of like the immediate? I've always heard about like the immediacy of like stand up is like so scary, but also like really rewarding. Is that true for you?
I don't find it as scary, but it's definitely rewarding. I think there's something
Hmm.
about the idea of like I write something, and in different times when you can go out and perform live, you write it, you can take it on stage, see where it resonates, where it doesn't, and then like tinker with it, and then take it out again the next night or even that same night. Like if you, you know, if you're really diligent about like working between shows, um, and yeah, I think that's like really, I love that feeling of like knowing. I think when I was writing a book, the hardest part for me was I would write sometimes for like weeks or months with no feedback and just be like,
Hmm.
well, I like it. And then
Yeah.
send it to my editor and wait for her notes. And like, fortunately, we were on the same page with my editor, Stephanie, who was just like the best and just she gave great notes and I think made the book the best it could have possibly been because of her involvement. But you know, because it's not like stand up where I can't just bounce like 4 new sentences off of her every day. Whereas you can go
Right.
on stage and be like, just add like little tags here and there to a joke and be like, is this working? And it just like calibrating the success of longer form writing with less feedback is for me like psychologically a challenge, which I think that's part of the reason that I've worked in late night for so long, is that you're creating a show every week. You're turning in material every couple days or every
Mhm.
day. We're, Jesus and Mero, we do 2 shows every week. And so it's just like the stuff you're doing, the feedback is like, you do it and then you're on to the next thing. I, um, I think I like other kinds of long form writing, but especially early in my career, gravitated towards like write a bunch of stuff. It happens. Write a bunch more stuff.
Mhm. Do you have the thing where like when you're about, even before you get a reaction, I guess it would only work in like a live setting, but like even before you say the joke, just the presence of an audience makes you feel and like observe your joke like in a different way, where you're immediately like, oh shit, like this doesn't work, or like, oh shit, this is really working. Does that happen for you? Like where it,
Yeah.
like you don't even have the reaction, but you know because
Yep.
someone's there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
really like that. I like the feeling of like even reciting or performing stuff I've written in front of a crowd. I think I I hear myself differently than when I'm just like
Right.
writing and like thinking about stuff at home or with a friend, where I say something to an audience and then like based on, I know you're saying not based on the reaction, but like based on just like the feel of the room when I say
Right.
something, I go, oh, this needs another sentence of explanation, or like this, people are really into this. I can feel that they're on board with this, and I can push this further and get more out of it because this is something that people are like that's really resonating with people, and I that feeling is so fun. Whether it's like, oh, interesting, I didn't know this about the thing I was saying,
Right.
or
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
it's just like I'm on stage and something is going really well, and I just am like hearing myself and like responding to myself, like riffing with myself on stage and being like,
Yeah.
oh, I can keep building this because of
Yeah.
how people have responded, or because of just it sounds different coming out live, and then I go, oh, I can build it in this way or modify it in this way. Yeah, it's like I like that, and I miss that about live performance.
Is that kind of like, am I just being dumb in terms of like not knowing that that's like the central joy of like performing anything?
No, I don't think so. Because I think they're like, I think being in the moment and like being present and feeling the audience, or like if you're a performer that acts for film or the stage, or improv and stuff. I think uh I think the idea of like being in that moment and like feeling really in the moment is one of the central appeals. But I don't think that's like a dumb question. Like I think getting laughs feels really good, and then feeling really present on stage and feeling like, oh, this thing I wrote that I thought was done, this is still like living and breathing, or like
Right.
maybe tonight, just tonight, there's like a way to change this for like the vibe of the room that will feel really gratifying but can never be replicated. And so that's another part of the live performance. But I think just like one thing I like about it is like when I'm on stage um doing a show, I'm not doing anything else. So like, which is so, that's so like obvious to say, but it's like I'm like really keyed into what's
Yeah. It's
happening
like,
in that moment in that room, right? And so I'm
yeah.
not like on my phone, or I'm not worrying about like sending, like replying to emails that haven't replied to you. And I think like being really present with an audience and with yourself as like a real joy, and like the more you can achieve that on stage, like the more exciting and rewarding it is.
Yeah, I feel like it's even, it feels true for like even film, like when I was in like film school or something
Mm-hmm.
and like showing like a comedy like sketch or film or whatever. I like it was that same thing where like even before I get a reaction, I immediately have that like feeling of like observing my own thing
Mm-hmm.
differently just
Yep.
because people are there.
Yeah.
And I think
I
that's pretty
I
cool.
think I think that's really exciting. And I think like there's this fun balance of like, here's my vision that I'm presenting to people,
Hmm.
or mine, or my vision, or the vision of like the group that I'm working with, and like I just want to share that. And then with stand up, you also get the opportunity to go, okay, here's how people respond to it. And I have the choice to change it to try to communicate differently, or to like keep doing it the way I want, and maybe people respond to it in a way that wasn't what I counted on, but like it's important to me to perform it this way or to say it this way. And I think that's really like those choices are really exciting. I think it was Mike Birbiglia I heard talking about this one time, who said like performing stand up is a negotiation between like exactly what you want to say and then what the audience expects or wants to hear. And like obviously it's like less artistically rewarding to start all the way over here and be like, I think the audience wants to hear about X, Y, and Z and just talk
Right.
about
Yeah.
that. But it's also like there's also like something that can feel a little withholding about like, well, I wrote it this way, and if they don't like it, they're gonna have to hear it anyway. So like
Yeah.
seeing how much work you can do to stay on this end and like draw the audience towards you is really
Yeah.
that's like a fun project, you know,
Yeah.
to be like, okay, I really want to bring them towards me, so like can I take 2 steps here and then draw them in the rest of the way.
Is the trick like seeming like you're not trying to entertain them, or is that something that you're not concerned with? Like you're there to entertain them, and you know that, and they know that.
I'm okay with that personally, but I think there are
Mm-hmm.
also really great comedians who approach things from a different angle, where they're like, I'm here to do my thing, and they're gonna come to me, and that's how good I am that I can bring them to me. But I think, excuse me again,
Sorry.
for me, I like to draw people. You know, I don't mind people knowing that I'm there to entertain them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like I'm not. There are there are like limits to that too. Like I think because I think there's also there's a type of performer that's like, I'm putting on a show, like this is your night out.
Yeah.
It's the big show. And I think that can
Yowza.
also, yeah, and it can also be very admirable, right? Like when there's somebody
Mm-hmm.
that's like, I've like big physical presentation, and like I've built in these like really intricate scenic act outs on stage where I'm like playing characters. And I think that's like really it's like really can be really dazzling and wonderful and joyful. And I just am not that talented. So I think for me it's like, hey, let's have a good time. I think that's like the ethos of my stand-up is like, hey everybody, let's have a good time together. And that's like about as high key as I'll take it. You know, I'm not like, hey, I'm just here telling you what I thought and take it or leave it, which some people just like murder doing that. And I'm like, not me, not that cool. But then I'm also like, I'm not like closing my set with a backflip because I can't do that. So,
right.
but I do want everybody to have a nice time. And I think it's okay that they know that.
That's good. Did this feel like therapy, this interview? Because I feel like, I don't know, I always feel like when I conduct interviews, I make it like, I feel like I'm a therapist or something.
Oh, I don't know. It felt, I mean, it felt good talking about it. I always, I'm like a real talker. I'm a real narcissist. So I love answering a question. I love talking about like comedy craft stuff on a real intricate level. And I like love answering a good, interesting question. So I had a real nice time.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that's a good note to end it on, I guess.
Terrific. Well, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for coming on. It's
my
been a real
pleasure.
pleasure.